Well, welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short. Glad to have you along for the discussion today. Today, we're going to be talking about something very local, very community based, and that is the dress code at a church. What should be the dress code at a church? For a long time in this country, the dress code used to be pretty formal. You would see men in most of all their suits and their ties, and women in their fancy dresses, and you would see a formal dress code. But with the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, the seeker movement, you see a more casual dress code. Well, I'm going to argue that that casual dress code, if it's not taken to an extreme, is actually the better methodology to go for a church. And I'm going to give some reasons why I think a casual dress code on Sunday morning is better than a formal dress code on Sunday morning. And we've all been into churches with formal dress codes, and everybody has their shoes shined. The men are, like I said, wearing suits and ties, many three-piece suits. The pastor is always wearing a suit and tie. The choir, the ushers all have their suits on and their ties on. Very formal. The women often have fancy hats on. It's just, in a sense, it's almost like a parade of fashion. People use the Sunday morning church service to try out their new clothes. They oftentimes, for example, the elderly, for example, senior citizens, they don't get out of the house much, and so Sunday is their big day, and so they dress up. They don't normally dress up during the week. They don't have any occasion to dress formally, and so the men wear their suits on Sunday, and that's about the only time they use the suit, except maybe at a funeral or a wedding. They're not going into the office. They're not working for the corporations in the downtown skyscrapers like New York City, Wall Street, and so they're going casual during the day after they retire, and then on Sunday morning, they'll come in and they'll wear more formal attire. And the same with the women. They don't normally have any occasion to dress up, so Sunday is their big day. And so they use their Sunday morning time as a way of trying out their new clothes or using it to just get out of the house and look better than they normally look, dress up. And it's the formal occasion for that. But there are really good reasons why that old style system is not as good as the one now that we see, with some disclaimers. I want to add that. There is a sloppy casualness that really does disrespect the church and disrespects the Lord, actually, disrespects God. If you have casual clothes, but you wear sloppy shorts and you wear flip-flops and you wear pajamas to church. I've seen, believe it or not, I've gone to churches where some people actually wear their pajama bottoms, their pajama pants to the church because they're comfortable, because they like it, it feels good, because it's casual and they don't have to dress up. And we see that all around society today in some areas where people are so casual and so loose and so carefree about their clothing. You see them go into the grocery store in the pajamas, slippers, actually bedroom slippers. You'll see them go into a store, convenience store, with a bedroom slippers and PJs on. And it's almost as if they're just moving from their bedroom to the bathroom, only they're doing it in public. They're going from their car to the convenience store or even the regular store to pick up some food items, and they just never take off their pajamas. And so they are super, super casual. Well, I have seen people go to church on Sunday morning and they're actually in their pajamas. And I haven't seen anybody go to church with their slippers on, but I've seen people go to church with flip-flops on and super casual. and about as loose and as carefree as you would want to ever see. And I think that that is bordering on, if not crossing the line from disrespect, from respect to disrespect, because you're going to church, you're going to be gathering with other Christians, you're going to be singing praises to God. And if you can't get up enough energy, a motivation to get yourself at least dressed casually, and it doesn't have to be formal, but at least casual attire. Now, what I'm dressed here, this is more semi formal. It's not casual in the sense that I do have a blazer, I have a sports coat, but I do have a shirt on, and it's it's not totally wrinkled, and everything isn't dirty and needs a wash, and so this is sort of semi formal. Formal would be if I wore the tie. Super formal would be if I had a tuxedo on with a bow tie. And so at weddings and at funerals and places where you might rent a tux or a suit, special occasions, yes, those are important. But normally, it seems to me that you don't go to church. You don't rent a tux to go to church. You wouldn't want to rent a tux to go to church because that would be overdoing it. But within the range of formal and informal, there's quite a range and quite a room for whatever you would like to wear. And so in that range, you can operate and really find out, the best spot for you and your family, and what's practical and what's not practical. So, uh, in a healthy church, you would probably find some people coming in with what I wear right here. The pastor might be wearing a sports coat and a tie. There might be some people in the congregation that are wearing a blazer, men wearing a blazer, a suit, and a shirt, but not a tie. Or there would be some people who would be wearing a tie with their suit, a three-piece suit or two-piece suit, and that's fine. That's fine if that's what they feel comfortable and that's what they feel like wearing. If they don't, if that's what they're used to, if they have a job and they're used to that and they feel good in that and they want to dress that way, that's perfectly fine, acceptable. That's the way that almost everyone went to church 50 years ago. You would very rarely see a picture in the 1940s or 1950s of a church service without the men in suit and ties, or a blazer and ties, or a sports coat and a tie. And a lot of them in the 30s, 20s, and 30s and 40s, they actually wore hats to church, and the men would not wear the hat inside. The women would actually wear the hats inside quite a bit. In fact, recently I noticed that in quite a few African American churches, there is almost a formal dress code. I'm not kidding. In many African American churches, if you were to visit there on a Sunday morning, you would see most of the women would actually be wearing hats inside during the service. And you would see the men in sport coat, suit, or suit and tie. And the pastor might even be wearing a three-piece suit. And all dressed up, formal, and that's perfectly fine. But there are some reasons why to have almost a formal dress code for Sunday morning would be not so good. And I'm going to give a few reasons for that. I know that today the more casual dress code is just wear a shirt and pants, even jeans. You could wear jeans if they're not dirty and wrinkled, and a shirt if it looks nice. And there's a more informal dress code. And there's a really good reason to have an informal dress code in a church. And here are some of the reasons. And this is speaking from a male's perspective, a man's perspective. I could go down a whole list of the concerns of women for having a more relaxed dress code. But as far as the male perspective on this, I think most men would rather have a more relaxed dress code when going to church, because you don't want anything to stand in the way of a man going to church. We already know that most of the people that attend on a Sunday morning are women. In some churches, it's very dramatic. It's like 75, 80% women in the church sanctuary on a Sunday morning. In more of the contemporary seeker, modern churches, evangelical mega churches, it's more probably 70 or 60% women, 30% men, 40% men. But in no instance do I know of any church where it's predominantly and majority men in the service. So you really don't want to provide any barriers or walls putting up for men coming into the church. And one of the barriers that really should be torn down is that formal dress code. You don't want men having to think that, hey, unless I have a three-piece suit, it will really not look right for me to go into a church because everybody's dressed up formally and I maybe don't have a three-piece suit. There are many men who do not ever wear a suit. And these are people, these are not poor people. These are not people who are jobless. These are people, think of, for example, at Facebook, the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg. He never wears a suit. He's a billionaire. He never wears a suit. That his culture, his corporate culture is very casual. In fact, he goes to the other extreme. He wears a hoodie most of the time, which is, I would say, atypical of a business CEO. Although he did show up before Congress and he did put on a suit and tie out of respect for the hearings that he was invited to attend and speak at. So when he went to Washington, he wore the suit and tie. And that seemed like a right thing to do. But business casual now is usually the norm. Even on Wall Street, for example, these big investment houses that are known and are famous for the Brooks Brothers pinstripe suit and tie, and every day they used to go in dressed formally. That has been relaxed. A lot of that is gone now. So there are a lot of guys in the modern times that just simply don't wear suits. They may not even own a suit. Some may own a suit, but they haven't worn it for so long that if they were to put it on, it probably wouldn't fit. And that's another reason why the formal dress code for churches really should not be there. There should not be even implied that you have to dress up to go to church. Because if you haven't worn your suit a lot and you don't wear it to work on a regular basis, or you're not attending formal gatherings that you need the suit, it might have gotten to the point where if you put that suit on, it wouldn't fit you. So the man would have to actually go and get it altered at the tailor's, and he would have to get it worked on to actually make it wearable. And so that might be an excuse. I mean, we don't want to put up any excuses for men, especially to go to church. And so we wouldn't want to make the excuse, well, my suit doesn't fit me anymore, and that church is formal, and so if I walked in there without a suit and tie, they would be staring at me. Another thing is maybe the suit isn't cleaned, so he would have to plan ahead and take it to the dry cleaner and get it cleaned just in order to go to church. And that seems like another unreasonable, impractical barrier for the church to have to invite people, to welcome people into the church. It's better to have people feel that they can come to church in a casual attire. And what would that be? What would a casual attire mean? Well, it could be a nice clean pair of jeans. It could mean a clean shirt. It could possibly even mean a t-shirt or some kind of t-shirt. It could be colored t-shirt or white t-shirt. But it normally would be some color t-shirt that you would find that a person might wear to a sporting event or some kind of a other thing. That would be very casual indeed. That would be very, very casual indeed. But if it was clean, it wasn't all wrinkled, it didn't have any profane or obscene logo on it, but that is acceptable now in casual attire, a shirt. And some men, you can actually wear a t-shirt under a blazer or sports coat. So that's perfectly fine. You would hope that people wouldn't come there with dirty clothes and look like they had been slept in and just rolled out of bed, slept in their clothes, and then came to church. Although even those people, I don't think anybody would want to turn them away. We don't want to put up any artificial barriers. So those people, hey, if that's what they've done, they'd probably slip in the back, sit in the back. That's fine. I mean, as long as they're not, we want to teach people to not disrespect church. You don't want to dress down to go to church. You don't want to act like you don't care about the way you look at church or anywhere. You want to communicate that you are mindful that you do represent yourself, you represent your values, you represent your worldview, and you don't want to come across like you're just a sloppy slob and you don't care what people think, you don't care how you smell, or you don't brush your teeth, or you don't try to comb your hair, or you're just some kind of a mountain man or recluse that you just come in. You want to be respectful of other people, and when you're in a public place, and so yeah, you probably want to discourage people from underdressing or dressing down to go to church. Like I mentioned before, there probably should be an understanding that, hey, you don't wear your pajamas to church on a Sunday morning, even though it may be convenient to just roll out of bed, jump in the car, and come to church. Flip-flops, again, usually not appropriate for church, but, again, we live in a very casual age. That would not be the worst thing that one could wear. I guess out in California in the 60s, some of the hippies used to just come in with their bare feet, which is fine. I mean, I'd rather have them in the church than not going to church because they don't have shoes. But nowadays, everybody can have shoes, and most people are not homeless. Most people own a pair of shoes. Most people try to find a pair of shoes. Even if you're homeless, you can go to a resale shop or the Salvation Army thrift store or whatever and get yourself $1 pair of shoes that look pretty nice. So it's not a matter of cost. It's not a matter of class. It's not a matter of social status. You want to encourage people to not dress down to go to church, but they definitely don't have to meet that formal standard barrier the way churches did, say, in earlier times, because that would be a barrier to especially a lot of men, because if they didn't have their suit and pants cleaned, if they didn't have their suit and pants ironed, maybe it's all wrinkly, it hasn't been ironed in a long time, so they would have to do that. Maybe it doesn't fit because they don't wear it very much, especially if they're retired. Maybe it's, in some churches, sad to say, there's almost a kind of battle of the name brands, the logos, again, I've seen African American churches where there's sort of a status symbol of you try to show off your new clothes and your designer label clothes and your designer purses and all those things, and can become a very worldly, carnal rivalry. Well, so and so's better dressed than I am, so I have to up my wardrobe and do this and that, and it kind of becomes a silly little thing. That's not so much with the men. That takes place with women, with their wardrobe and their handbags and their hats and their shoes, and their all kinds of accessories. So that's a bad thing, and we don't want to encourage that, because we wouldn't want any men or women to not come to church on Sunday morning because their suit was bought at a off the rack retailer instead of handmade or custom made for the man with some fancy label. We wouldn't want that to happen. We wouldn't want this to become a class issue where the upper class is trying to show off their wealth and see how fancy their shoes are. Men coming in with $300, $500 leather shoes, and people looking down at your shoes. There is sort of a snobbery that can come into the church if there are quite a few people who are wealthier and they wear fancier clothes. Some of the other people might think that they have to live up to that standard. And I've seen it. I've heard of people walking into, I've never had this happen, but I've heard of people walking into fancier clothes stores and asking about certain clothes, and the salesperson actually turned them away and said, "You probably don't want to shop here." Basically sizing them up by looking at their shoes and looking and seeing that they weren't the name brand labels or whatever, and saying this person is not going to buy anything here, I can tell already. So that's snobbery. We don't want that snobbery in the church. We want everyone to feel warm and welcome when they come into the church. So it's really, I think it's a blessing that the newer, more casual attire is now pretty much established in the churches, and you can walk in a pair of jeans and in a short shirt. And I've worn jeans. I don't usually wear jeans to church on Sunday morning, but I've worn them and it totally fit right in. I'm not talking about the wholly raggedy, dirty, torn up, too big, too little, baggy jeans. I'm not talking about, just sloppy clothes. I'm talking about a nice pair of jeans, a nice shirt, just regular shoes. Another thing is some of the men might say, well, I haven't polished my shoes. They're not just mirror perfect in the shine. That's another thing. We don't want men thinking that they have to spend a whole lot of time getting ready for church. Now, again, women often enjoy that, and that's part of dressing up and then going out, whether it's to church or some other formal or social gathering, and they might enjoy that. But usually men don't like that. They don't want to have to work too hard to go to church. And I don't blame them. And if you look in the New Testament, we don't have any of that. We don't even have any kind of hint that clothing, wardrobe had anything to do with the Christian church. And it really shouldn't be having anything to do with the Christian church today. So I rather enjoy the more casual dress code today. Another thing is that we don't want people feeling like they're being judged because they're not dressed fancy. There are some people who feel that in order to leave an impression that they're doing fine and their business is doing fine and their career is doing fine, they have to dress up formal. And that sort of communicates success and achievement and whatnot. And then by implication, not doing that, it might leave people who are not dressed up fancy feeling like, well, that guy's trying to impress people with his clothes. His that costs a lot. Another thing men don't want to have to do is spend a whole lot on clothes. So in the old days, clothing and the wardrobe was a big chunk of a person's budget. And if you look even during the Great Depression in this country, you see these guys standing in line, the bread line, for a little piece of bread during the Great Depression, and they all had their sport coats on. And many of them had a tie on and a hat on, dressed formally, waiting for the soup kitchen. Well, we don't do that anymore, and I'm happy we don't do that anymore, because it puts pressure on men to try to I have to spend money to go to church. I have to spend money on my wardrobe. I have to spend money on this, that. No, we don't want money to be an obstacle. We don't want clothing to be an obstacle. We don't want image or some kind of a class barrier or any kind of economic barrier. We don't want any of that. We want to communicate that come as you are. And but at the same time, we want to also communicate, but don't purposely try to dress sloppy or casual. Don't try to dress down and take it too far in the almost a disrespectful way. You're going to worship together with other people. You're going to be listening to the Word of God. This is important. We need to communicate that it's important. And while you don't have to dress up formally, you don't have to get into they used to call it Sunday best. That's where it came. The expression came in because people were dressing to the top on Sundays, and that got to be ridiculous. And I'm glad that is no longer the case. And I wish a lot of the African American churches would do away with that formal dress code also, because a lot of young people in the community need to go to church, and we don't want any barriers. We don't want any obstacles for anybody to go to church, and we don't want to have them feel looked down upon or judged because of their clothing, their attire. We want people to feel free and comfortable and come in and out of the church, because it's the place of God. It's the church of God. It's God's house. It's not any one class of people's home or a group of people. It's God, and God wants to open his doors for everyone. Well, I hope that's been a helpful commentary, and we'll see you back next week on another edition of the program. God bless.